Hey, everybody. Appreciate you tuning in. This is just a quick reminder that if you guys enjoy the content, just do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, give it a like. Let me know what you thought of the fights and all that shit in the comments. And thank you guys as always for tuning in. I appreciate it. But the weird thing that really happened over the weekend is it almost feels like when this illegal stuff starts happening, right? Like the shit that's like these fouls, I guess, if you want to call them that, for in these fights, right? Like these illegal blows and stuff that end up, it forces the judges or the referees rather into these kind of odd positions where they have to make a judgment call about what to do with the fight, right? So it starts off on Friday night in the 205-pound title bout between Corey Anderson and Vadim Nemkov, right? Corey Anderson started off maybe a little bit slow. I felt like Nemkov was starting to had a good early first round, but then Anderson started taking over and being able to get on top in the second and third, right? But in the third round, he lands a headbutt from I think they were kind of in side control, if I remember correctly. I know Anderson was on top. And it splits Nemkov open. They end up calling it a no contest, and Nemkov retains his title. Now, fast forward to last night, and one of the fights on the prelims was between Chris Barnett and Martin Buday. And in this fight, Martin Buday had been winning 2 rounds, definitely won the first 2 rounds in my opinion, and then gets into the third round, has Chris Barnett pushed up against the cage and lands an illegal elbow to the back of the head that stops the fight. We're about 2.5 minutes into the third round. Dan Miragliotta decides to call it. He decides to send it to the judges' scorecards. It's ruled a technical, unanimous decision win for Martin Buday, despite the fact that he ended the fight with an illegal blow. Okay? So, 2 instances where illegal blows were landed and you had 2 different outcomes so far, right? Now, the same thing happens later on the main card, right? In the UFC main card last night, in the fight between Caio Borralho and Gadzio Margegiov. And this is what I mean. It's weird. It's almost like this external force that kind of seeps its way into all of the fights for that weekend and permeates all throughout it, right? And spreads. And it's we're dealing. I think there was another illegal knee at some point during this card too that didn't end up resulting in the fight ending. But there are 3 instances right there where illegal blows ended the fight. And in the case of Caio Borralho, there was a minute left in the third round. Borralho had clearly won the first 2 rounds. And again, was winning the third. But while Gadzhi's hand is planted on the mat and they're up against the cage, Caio Borralho lands an illegal knee that ends the fight, basically, right? Gadzhi says he can't continue. And there's some confusion about the doctor saying that he potentially could continue. And it's okay, each of the instances are a little bit different. When you're talking about Corey Anderson, I'm actually going to, I think Corey Anderson versus Nemkov I think that was ruled correctly. I think that it happened in the third round, and yes, Anderson was winning, but it's a 5-round title fight, and you have to let that play out, and there was too much of the fight left to send it to judges' scorecards or determine who the winner was going to be. And I don't know if there's rules or stipulations around, maybe you have to complete 3 rounds before you can do that anyway. But I think a no contest was the right judgment in that. I definitely think it was an accident from Corey Anderson. He called it out, right? Brought the ref over and everything. And it was handled. I think a no contest was valid, especially because, just using the eye test, Corey was winning that fight, right? So it's kind of hard to give it to Nemkov on a DQ for an illegal headbutt. It was very clear. And I know that, And the DC made this point too when he was talking about illegal strikes. In the case of Anderson versus Nemkov, Anderson hit him with his head. That's not typically, you're not allowed to throw head strikes in the UFC. So that's clearly unintentional. But DC made a good point in that when you're throwing strikes in the UFC, you're throwing them with intent. And I mean, granted, there are some things that your opponent can do that, maybe he moves last second or something and you're already midway through and you can't retract fast enough to react to that and it ends up being illegal because of some weird circumstance. That's going to happen. But in both of the instances last night, I thought that the fouls were kind of egregious. And if you look at what Caio Borralho did, his knee, and granted, he was winning the entire fight. And if he doesn't throw that illegal knee, I think he definitely is winning that fight. He's walking away with the decision. But they deducted a point, right? So it was clearly illegal. And Barallo was arguing that it should have been legal because his knee wasn't on the ground. And to me, that indicates that Barallo doesn't have a firm understanding of what the rules are. And as an athlete, that's on him. You shouldn't be, I mean, like, you have to enforce this stuff some way, right? And a disqualification is a tough penalty to pay. But when the rules are very clear and you're not under, it's on, I know they're confusing, but if you're going to be a professional athlete in the UFC, it's on you to understand them and know what to do in those situations. And know that, and his hand was very clearly planted. It's a complicated situation because everybody's going to look at that fight and say, well, Barallo would have won anyway. And it's true, but it's also like, don't you have to at some point enforce the fact that the blow was illegal? You know, like you almost have to like, you can't take a point from somebody and then let them win the fight at the end if the fight ended due to an illegal blow that the other person couldn't continue. And is there maybe a loophole there where somebody could take advantage of that if they're down in the fight? Yeah, but on the flip side, like I'm saying like you could put on a front, make it worse than it is, but you got hit with the illegal shot, so it doesn't really matter. On the flip side of that though, if you're winning a 2-round fight, if you know that you're up 2 rounds and you get into the 3rd round, you could throw something that seems unintentional and it's just a slippery slope. Like you could land something that was unintentional, that's illegal, that could potentially stop the fight and be awarded a win still. Right? So there's problems on both sides of it. I think that when you're talking about, I think the only way to handle it is you have to penalize fighters. I think that you would be surprised at what they are. And again, some things are incidental. Some things are just going to happen. And I really do think there are instances where you can roll things in accident and you can say, all right, that clearly wasn't done intentionally. Like his technique, the intention behind the technique he was throwing was valid, but this person reacted in a way that made it illegal. That's different, right? But when you're talking about even the case with Martin Buday and Chris Barnett, that wasn't the first illegal blow that he landed to the back of the head. He hit him with several of them. Several elbows that I thought were questionable, several punches that I thought were questionable, and you didn't get a warning from Dan Miragliotta, so is it really on the athlete? Yes and no. Again, I think you have to have a firm understanding of what the rules are as the athlete so that in those situations, you're not confused. You shouldn't be confused on the rule set about the fight that you're going to be in. You shouldn't be mixing it up with some other thing. Like that should be part of your game plan. It should be studying that. You need to be well rehearsed in that, in my opinion. And Buday, in that situation, despite the fact that like it's a well-known rule in MMA too that you can't strike to the back of the head. So that's like something that you just need. That one was like the most egregious to me, more so than Caio Barallo's even, because like I can almost understand the confusion with Caio Barallo, but it is like a universal rule in MMA. And because there's some differences with the knee being down him, I understand like that's a little bit, I still think it's on the athlete to understand that during the fight and not do that. But like the back of the head one is universal throughout MMA. Like you can't fucking do that. And I thought he did it several times in the fight. I thought that should have been a disqualification, to be honest. I really do. I thought that one was pretty egregious. I don't think that Buday should have gotten the win for that one. And I think he should have been deducted a point too. I thought his was more egregious than Barallo's. I thought there was way more intent. He knew exactly what he was doing. He could see his target directly in front of him, right? He's not like posture. And you have more control. Pretty much, you have more control with your hands. It's a closer space from you to that person. To, you know what I mean? I mean, that looked more intentional to me than Barallo's. And like I said, I can almost understand Caio's confusion. Not that it excuses it, but man, you got to be on point with that stuff. You got to know that stuff, and just be like, you can blame the ref and say that he like should have been giving him warnings. And yeah, I agree. But it's also like he should have known that he shouldn't have been able to fucking do that shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, the athletes have to be more well educated on this stuff going into the fight. That's just my opinion. I think it would be a huge help. And I also think that the penalties need to be stricter and they need to be more swift with issuing them, and it needs to be like less cut and dry. Fence grab that prevents the takedown, point deduction. Eye poke, point deduction. Start deducting these fucking points, and I think you'll be surprised at how the numbers will come down. I think these athletes are more capable of like, and the problem is that you see like some of these loopholes with what is kind of cheating, right? They're fouls, and you see these fouls committed and these things like this happen where they still pick up a win. And granted, like I said, I know it's gray area and all that, but it's like there's problems with it throughout the rest of MMA too, where these fouls keep popping up and people keep getting away with things and they keep doing little dirty things, and it's because they know that the penalty's not there for it. Like I said, things it drills down into things like fence grabs and all that. Like, I think that you have to be stricter and more swift with the fucking penalties that you're giving out for that stuff. I think that's the only way to fix it. I think that you have to, like, if people know that they're going to get a point deducted, they're going to stay away from doing shit like that. And they're going to make sure when they go into that fucking fight that they have a very clear understanding of what that rule set is for the state that they're fighting in and everything like that. They'll be more well prepared. But it has to be like, I think one of the best refs, and just like this random thought pop, but like Jason Herzog always does a great job of, like, he makes swift decisions on stuff, right? Like, you need that mentality, and you need to be able to, like, you need to be a little bit more liberal with taking points for this illegal stuff, because I think it's starting to become more and more of a problem because people realize that they can get away with it, and it impacts fights. So, fuck. I mean, even if you go back to, I think it was the Oliveira and Dustin Poirier fight, Oliveira basically grabbed, what is essentially like a gi grip, except maybe better because you're coming in from over top of the glove, and got a sweep off of it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I know that Oliveira probably wins that fight anyway. Like, he's just, I think, a better fighter, and he's a little bit better. His jiu-jitsu's a lot better, like we saw that. But still, it doesn't change the fact that could have changed the outcome of the fight. I think we need stricter penalties for this shit. I think it's the only way you're going to start seeing it get cleaned up, because you're not just seeing it at a low level. You catch it at a low level a little bit more often with these guys like Caio Borralho, who's doing, it's a co-main event, but this is his UFC debut, and same thing for Gaji. This was, like, kind of, in my opinion, a weaker card. Like, there were some good fights on it and some good names and stuff, but that's your co-main event, you know what I mean? But my point is that when you're not high level like that, with Oliveira, like, it's a little more sneaky. With guys who are lower level, it's more blatant and out in the open, right? It's more of an issue, and you can see it happening out in front of you because they're not as technically refined and they don't hide it. But, like, there are some guys who are really fucking good at cheating, Like, Tim Elliott kind of bragged about it in his last fight, I recall, about, like, some of the little, like, dirtier tactics that he would use in order, you know what I mean? It's like, John Jones with the eye poke. It's like, if it's there, people are going to take advantage of it, and I think that's why you have to penalize it. Anyway, ran over.